Thank you. Good morning and welcome to everybody to the Virtual Planning and Development Management Committee on today, the 29th of July 2020. Welcome everybody, as I say. We're going to go straight to apologies, and I believe we have apologies from Councillor Barnacle, and Councillor Robertson will be substituting this morning. Thank you very much, Councillor Robertson, for coming today. I'm going to start by introducing the top table, obviously the virtual one. So this is the team that I have with me today. We have Mr. Christian Smith from Development Management and Building Standard Services Manager, Mr. Jamie Scott, team leader, Mrs. Anne Conliffe, another team leader. We have Councillor Bob Braun, who is my vice convener, and we have Mr. Jeff Fogg, legal manager, and Mr. Danny Williams from committee services. Can we please can I ask IT please to help Councillor Reid to join the committee this morning? If you'll do that in the meantime while I'm going through the usual preamble prior to talking about the applications, please. Thank you. Now, members are reminded that during any consideration of applications, that if you are unable to participate in any way, if you have to leave, or if your internet link goes down, then that will mean that unfortunately that you will not be able to take part in that particular vote. It is the responsibility of each councillor to assess whether they have heard enough to be able to vote or not. And if you could please notify in the meeting chat that if you are leaving the meeting or if you lost connection, then we will be able to assess the situation. Thank you. Now, for the proceedings today, can I remind councillors and officers to use the chat function to attract my attention? I do not have a visual of everybody that is on the meeting, so I would prefer if you could use the chat box, and then you'll be able to let me know whether you want to put forward a question or a comment. I'm going to be particularly strict today, and at the question section I will be asking for questions, and at the comment section councillors can make any comments or continue the debate as they wish, but we will not be muddying the two. Okay, I will now ask the clerk to go through a roll call. Danny, if you could do that. Hopefully we will have Councillor Reid on the call at the moment, but Danny, if you could go through the roll call, and if councillors could please state that they are present when your name is mentioned. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, convener, and good morning. Good morning all. As the convener said, you just let me know when I call your name if you are present. Councillor Anderson.
Present.
Councillor Barnacle. Sorry, apologies. We've got apologies from Councillor Barnacle. Councillor Braun.
Present.
Councillor Drysdale.
Present.
Councillor Gray.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Illingworth.
Present. Present.
Councillor James.
Present.
Convener.
I am present.
Yep. Councillor Purvis.
Present.
Have we got Councillor Reid on?
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Present.
Councillor Williamson.
Present.
And Councillor Wilson.
Present.
And also Councillor Robertson.
Present.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for that. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. Can I ask, do we have any declarations of interest on the proceedings in front of us? If any councillors have a declaration of interest, could they please put DI into the chat box now, and I will come to you. Okay, as there has been no indication, I'll take that there is no deputations, no declarations of interest. Can I ask that we are happy to hear the deputations? There are deputations coming forward for 531. There is also, sorry, bear with me 30 seconds. There is also Mr. Richard McWilliams, who is the agent on behalf of the applicant for the Maryborough application, is here available for any questions if that's if something the committee wants. So can I have the agreement of the committee that we are happy to hear the deputations?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you very much, everybody. Yep, thank you for that. Okay, on to item 4, which is the minutes of the Planning and Development Management Committee from the 1st of July. Are we in agreement that those are an accurate reflection of the meeting? Okay, I will take that. Yep, thank you very much, but I will take silence as an agreement. Yes, Councillor Wilson.
Sorry, I didn't have time to press the Q button. It said to follow. Have they come round? I haven't seen them.
Yes, Councillor Wilson, they went round on Friday.
Okay, I'm sorry I missed them in the pile, Convener. I'm happy to accept them though in absentia.
Okay, if there is any issues, please let me know separately and we will take them forward. Thank you. Okay, so that is the previous work. We are now moving on to today's business. The first application in front of us is in Maryborough. This was deferred from the last meeting. So apologies to the applicant that had to happen, but we are hearing the details now. So local application and Maryborough election of 4 dwelling houses and associated works land south of Hillcrest in Maryborough, and I would like to ask Mrs. Conliffe to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener. I would now like to take members through a short presentation of the slides, which show both plans and various photographic images to set the scene for this proposal. The application is for the erection of 4 dwelling houses on a site within a small settlement of Maryborough. This layout plan, identified in red, shows the location of the site south of the existing property known as Hillcrest. It's located to the west of the main road through, and you can see the M90 on the left-hand side of the screen, which is to the west. And as I say, you can just see 1 or 2 properties. Next slide, please. This aerial photo shows 2 parts. To the left, it shows it in relation to the M90, which you can see curving round, and Kelty Bridge to the south. That was the M90 that I identified on the previous screen. And on the right-hand side of the screen, you can see a zoomed-in version. This allows the context of the site, including the existing trees, particularly along the southern boundary of the site. This is the proposed site layout. You will see that it shows a linear plots, which all then front onto the public road that runs through Maryborough. And the Hillcrest building that I mentioned earlier is to the north, just at the top of the screen. Whilst we're on this, if you can look particularly at the triangular area in green, that is part of the application site, but I'll explain it later in the next slide. Members will have read in the report of handling the significant history of this site, and will be well aware of the previous issue of the development site going beyond the settlement boundary as identified in LDP2. I've included this slide, therefore, just to show clearly the question, the area in question, which is the hatched area that you see just on the left-hand side of the screen. And this is the area that is actually out with the settlement boundary. But as you saw on the previous slide, it doesn't form part of the development area or indeed the garden area of the proposed houses. This slide shows the proposed layout of the houses and the elevations of one of the houses. Now I've chosen the one that is nearest to Hillcrest, which is actually plot 4, but all houses are of a similar design and scale with the same palette of finishing materials. We'll now move to a series of photos which seek to show the context of the surroundings. This first photograph is taken from the public road through Maryborough. It's obviously a relatively narrow road that runs through, but it's also very quiet. and you can see the property Hillcrest that I've been referring to throughout this presentation. This photograph is from a similar point, but now looks in the opposite direction towards the southern boundary of the site. There's an existing stable building which is located on the field out with the site to the south, and the trees that we picked up on the aerial picture, you can see them here, and most of those will be retained. We're now looking westwards across the site towards the M90, and helpfully there was a coach on the M90 just as we were taking the photograph, so it gives you the context of that. There is an intervening field of approximately 90 metres from the development site till you get to the M90. We're now at the southwest corner of the site, looking back across it towards Hillcrest in the north. There's clearly an undulation on the site, which generally slopes from north to south, but also has from east to west, creating a bit of a bowl for the development, which helps certainly in terms of site levels of the development. And this is a final photograph. It's from a similar spot and looks down the southern boundary of the site, including the existing landscaping of the site. That concludes the stills, and we'll now go back to the proposed site plan. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mrs. Condliffe. Okay, as I've already stated, we do have Mr. Richard McWilliams who is here. He is the agent on behalf of the applicant, and can I ask the committee, do we have any questions for Mr. McWilliams based on the information that we've just been given? No, it doesn't seem that we do. Mr. McWilliams, thank you very much for attending. Thank you very much for being available. Oh, I do apologise. Yep, I've just seen that. Councillor Wilson, you wish to ask a question of Mr. McWilliams, please do.
Thank you very much indeed. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. McWilliams. And thanks for coming in. The design and shape of the houses which we've seen in the still just a moment ago, did you consider any other house designs and types that may be more traditional for the setting of Maryborough?
Right, well, we felt that the palette of materials were, whilst the design of the houses are contemporary, we felt the palette of materials were in keeping and were of a traditional aesthetic that would tie in with the surrounding buildings. I mean, Maryborough, as you know, is it's quite a varied character throughout the whole of the village. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
Just carry on. Yeah, yes.
Yeah, no, I just went very quiet there. What we were trying to do was also with the form of the buildings was to you know, keep the buildings with a sort of raised wall head at the front, which again is a traditional form for the buildings. Sorry, there was a bit of interference there. I mean, rather you're looking at using render and a slate-like roof tile on the buildings. Also with the chimney features, it kind of gives the buildings a bit more character as well.
Thank you. That partially answers my question about the palette of materials, and I was more concerned with the size and scale of the houses. Given that the plot sizes are reasonably generous, did you consider any more, as I said in my first question, more traditional type of size and type of house?
The size of it and type of house, I mean, we were looking to achieve a sort of 4-bedroom size of house for the developer. As you said, the plot sizes are fairly generous, and because of the layout of the site all being accessed from the main road now, the plots are quite long, and as such that's dictated the shape of the houses to a certain degree. previously, you'll be aware we had a cul-de-sac arrangement which wasn't looked upon favourably, you know, by the previous plan applications.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. We also have a question from Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, convener. And yes, considering the generous size of the plots, and you're agreeing that the other houses within the settlement are quite variable in their designs, why have you went for basically 4 houses of the same design? It's very much the same question as Councillor Wilson. Do you feel that is going to fit in with what's already there? Because I was on the last committee, and I went for a site visit, and I had commented that the village had such a variable design of houses that you know, having a clump of 4 together with similar designs, it wasn't so pleasing on the eye as what's already there.
Sorry, Councillor Anderson, could you stick to just a question, please?
Well, the question is, did they consider changing, making variable designs rather than 4 similar designs in a row?
I would say that the houses they aren't all the same house type. They are essentially, there's 2 different house types on the site, 2 of which are handed versions of each other. They are all set back at different depths, and the buildings themselves do have a reasonable variation on their elevations with varied features. So we'd think that when you were driving past, it wouldn't look like identical houses by any manner of means. I would agree that the palette of materials does tie them together, but that would be the case with you know, many developments that have been built within the local area. And again, the palette of materials we've chosen have been sort of carefully selected to blend in with the local area, whilst providing a bit of variation as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have any further questions for Mr. McWilliams? No, Mr. McWilliams, nothing else is coming up on the chat. Okay. So thank you very much indeed for making the time to come to chat to us today, and thank you for that.
Thank you.
Okay, councillors, I would like to open it up now to questions for officers, and I repeat, can they please be questions? We will come to comments afterwards. So do we have any questions for officers regarding this application? Okay, thank you. We have a question from Councillor Robertson. Councillor Robertson, can we have your question, please?
Yes, thank you. I wonder why, when we get applications like this, that there's never anything tabled that shows us what the houses will look like in situ. It's very difficult for people who don't actually know Maryborough intimately to actually imagine what these houses are going to look like in position when they're built. So why do we never ever get offered a chance to see what they're going to look like if consent is given?
Mrs. Conliffe, could I ask you to answer that question, please?
Yes, thank you, convener. Councillor Robertson, we do sometimes have street elevations done, but it is not a requirement of the legislation in terms of the submissions that are required by applicants. It is useful, and I fully agree with that, but it's not something that we can insist upon. There are a number of architects' practices who will do it as a matter of course. They'll show a street elevation which will show what it will look like in situ, and I fully accept that it is extremely helpful to have that, but it is not something that is required by the legislation, so that is the reason why the vast majority don't have them.
It's just that in an instance like this where the impact of the development on the
Sorry,
small...
Councillor Robertson, is this another question?
Yes, but okay, I can't really ask it. I'll give us a comment later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wilson, could I have your question, please?
Thank you. It's a mirror image of my question. The agent really was there any discussion with the planning team about alternative house types and finishes?
Mrs. Conliffe, could you answer that, please?
Sure, yes, you would see within the report of handling that there's been a lot of history to this particular site. There's been a lot of discussion, which has focused in terms of numbers, in terms of layout, and also in terms of design. We are satisfied with what has been submitted. There is a bit of a mix with it being a similar house type, but as the architect was saying there earlier, they are handed. The palette of materials from our point of view was probably one of the most important things to get that right. And we have to deal with what is submitted. So there was discussion and we were satisfied with what has been proposed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Gray, you would wish to ask a question.
Thank you, Convener. Yes, again, perhaps to Anne. Are there any other two-storey houses within the village?
Mrs. Conliffe, yes, if you'd like to answer that.
Yes, there are. There's a mix of heights within the settlement of Maryborough. When I was looking at it, I think you've got approximately 4 other two-storey properties, maybe 2 1.5 to 1 3/4 stories, and about 6 single-storey properties. So it's a real mix within the settlement of Maryborough.
Thank you, Ms. Conliffe.
Thank you. Councillor Waters, you have a question.
Thank you, Convener. They're just looking for some clarification or a bit more on the protection of the area that's within the application boundary, but out with the site, the boundary for Maryborough, and just checking, just want a reassurance that item 10 in the conditions will give protection that there won't be any garden development or any other type of development out with the site outside of Maryborough boundary.
Okay, that's 2 questions for Mrs. Conliffe. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Yes, that was why I had the slide, just to make it very clear, because this has clearly been an issue with it being out with the settlement boundary of Maryborough. It has been included as part of the application site, simply, I believe, due to the ownership that is on the site as a whole. But it is very clear in terms of the layout. That's why there's going to be a new fence line, a new hedgerow going along that boundary. But in addition to that, whilst it was clearly shown that the plots were sufficient in size with regard to without that area in terms of our placemaking guide, we have suggested the condition that you are referred to, which is condition 10, and that's making it very clear that there should be no development within that. Should they want to increase even as garden, it would then become a change of use and it would need a formal application and have to go through the full planning process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have any further questions for officers? No, thank you very much indeed. Okay, I'm going to ask for a motion. If anyone would like to put a motion, put an M in the chat. Councillor Purvis.
Thank you, Convener. I would like to move refusal of this application on the basis of placemaking policies 1A and 1B in the Local Development Plan to 2019. I think some of the changes that have been made from previous applications, the fact it's no longer a cul-de-sac and that all of the buildings are fronted onto the main street, are welcome. But having visited, like some other councillors, the site again and being familiar with the site, I think that having 4 houses on this particular site constitutes overdevelopment. I think the contours of the site are particularly bad, but specifically the plots are very narrow. We see that these are quite an urbanised look of the houses and being very similar, and I think that that is out of keeping with the rural character of the Maryborough settlement, and I think that it constitutes overdevelopment. I think fewer houses on the site, 2 houses as the very original application put forward, would have been acceptable, but I don't think that this application justifies having 4 houses on the site, and therefore would like to move refusal on those policies 1A and 1B, primarily on the grounds of overdevelopment and not contributing positively to the built and natural environment in Maryborough. Thanks.
Okay. Do we have a second for Councillor Purves' motion? Councillor Robertson, you wish to second the motion?
I'm happy to second the motion on the grounds that Councillor Purves has laid out. Maryborough is a unique settlement, and it's got the houses here currently are a random build. It's on the edge of the Blair Adam Estate, which is as everyone will probably know, is a remarkable piece of ground and quite important in the locality. But the way that Maryborough is laid out just now, it's random build houses, and I think 4 houses of the design that's currently put forward, stacked one after the other, is going to look completely out of place. I would have found it really helpful if we'd actually been given a visual of what the houses were going to actually look like in situ, and it's very difficult for even me, who knows the site quite well, to imagine what that would be. But my fear is that they would look completely out of place without that visual evidence. So for that reason, I'm happy to second Councillor Purves.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Gray, you have an amendment.
Yes, I would wish to amend, and in so doing, move the paper. This village is, as has been said many times, of a random quality, and that hardly 2 houses are the same. I appreciate that point. But having said that, it's on a very small, narrow road, and exactly who is going to be concerned about whether or not there are 4 reasonably similar houses in a row as one drives along this very narrow road? Very few people, in fact. And how relevant is it? I can see no relevance at all. I can't see any reason why this really is justified a refusal. And you know, I'm very happy with the paper, and I move its acceptance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gray. I'm going to second that amendment. I took a trip out to Maryborough to get a full handle on the situation out there. There's a beautiful row of houses, very much on one side of the road, unique in themselves. This development, in my opinion, would add to that. There is no reason that a rural setting can't expand and continue its placemaking and design and individuality by having other houses on the other side of the street. These houses aren't identical. They do have variances. What they're going to be built of is unique, is interesting. They will be similar, but they will be different. And I think that this actually enhances the area. I think it does exactly what we want with placemaking. And it is a site that has been long discussed. It is there is an agreement that actually this site will have development on it, and I think it is an advancement, and I would second the paper and move forward on that. Now we have some comments as well. So Councillor Wilson, you would like to make a comment in support of the motion.
Thanks, Convener. Yes, and I'm reasonably familiar with the site from a previous life in planning. I think that my view on the report is it's gone a long way to trying to improve things, but could still do better. I don't like the urbanised design. I think there's a uniformity about the houses and the palette that much be made about the palette being consistent. It certainly is, but I think it's dull and boring to a degree. These plots are large. The agent has indicated that, particularly the one at the bottom of the picture we're seeing. There's been no consideration of other house types, whether single story or smaller houses, even that might be in demand in rural areas where folk are. These are 4-bedroomed houses. I just wonder who in the local market is going to be able to afford that. It looks like commuter type housing, and I would prefer to see something that had more variety in it and also offered an opportunity for smaller houses. I think it's disappointing. I think it creates an element of urbanisation. I understand Tom Gray's point, but I don't agree with him in that it doesn't matter really how many people are passing here. It's a highly visible site. You can see it off the motorway quite clearly, and also it creates I think a jarring introduction to the scattered settlement of Maryborough, and I'm happy to support the motion for refusal and the reasons.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Robertson, I see that you would like to make a comment. You have seconds, so I'll come back to you after we've heard from Councillor Anderson and Councillor Drysdale. Councillor Anderson, could you make your comment, please?
Thank you, convener. Yes, I was up at Maryborough the last time round, and I must say that when one drives through there, it's very difficult to find two-storey houses together. It's very much a mixture of 2-storey, single-storey cottages, etc., etc. If you look at this design, yes, it's variations on the same theme. It's a theme of 4 urban designed houses. Some are left hand, some are right hand. That's not to make it more aesthetic, visually acceptable. That is because the design there is to fit in so that everything works. As far as I'm concerned, you've got 4 urban houses going to be stuck in the end of a village that has no resemblance whatsoever to them. They will look out of place, and I would support the motion that it's not what we're looking for that particular settlement of Maryborough. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Drysdale?
Thank you, convener. Yeah, I mean, I fully support the amendment, and I think we're sending out we would be sending out the wrong message if we were to refuse permission for aesthetically pleasing houses such as this. You know, if I wasn't so happy where I am, I'd love one of them myself. But I think okay, it's a village setting, it's a small hamlet setting, if you want to call it that, and I understand the points that have been made, but I think we should be supporting responsible developments such as this, and I support the amendment.
Thank you very much, Councillor Drysdale. Can I ask if there are any further comments? Councillor Robertson, you will have a chance to sum up. Well,
I didn't propose the motion.
No.
I just want to have a clarification, if I may.
Yeah, clarification is on what, please?
Well, I would like to thank you for that. I'd like to direct the committee's attention to the settlement summary in the LDP2 with regard to Maryborough. And the settlement summary says Maryborough has the potential to accommodate some limited further development, mirroring, and that, listen to that word's important, mirroring the form of the existing settlement pattern. So 4 houses, all very similar, isn't the form of the existing settlement pattern. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, as per Standing Order 49, and I'm saying this because I'm being particularly precise, actually the mover and the seconder would have had a chance to do that again. Now I have accepted that Councillor Robertson has given an extra comment. I will take that as his summing up, and that's my understanding of the standing orders, because technically only 2 people should speak twice when it comes to comments, and that's the mover and the seconder. Are there any further comments regarding this application? No, then in that case, I will put it forward to for Councillor Purvis to sum up, and then we will move to the vote. Councillor Purvis.
Thank you very much, Convener. I just want to discuss a number of points that have been made by members during this debate. First, the comments made by Councillor Gray, and I'm sure this wasn't his intention, but I think perhaps they could have come across as slightly insensitive when he's saying that no one's going to be bothered about the design of the house types. I think that from the objection comments that we can see from the local community, that it will be local residents in Maryborough, those who have to live there, and in Kelty Bridge too, who will in particular be concerned about this. And when we are making decisions on a planning committee, we should be cognizant of that in trying to discharge our duty to make decisions within the policies. I think that if we look at the original decision notices that were issued previously, two of them actually explicitly say that a development comprising of a maximum of 2 dwellings would be more appropriate here. So this is not just what we are saying or what the local community are saying, but actually it's what the planning department has previously said. And while I accept the point, and I think Councillor Wilson made a very valid point that there are certainly improvements in this application, the fact it's no longer a cul-de-sac and the frontings are onto the main street, which is going some way to address these issues. I think equally Councillor Robertson's point about not mirroring the existing house types and settlement pattern is very valid as well. People will be familiar with another development, Middleton Park, that sits between Kelty Bridge and Maryborough, but the key difference there is that is separate and between the two settlements, whereas what we are trying to do here, or certainly what the application proposes, is putting a highly urbanised development right in the middle, slap bang in the middle of an existing rural settlement. And as I think Councillor Anderson articulated, there are a number of different house types there of varying degrees, different story levels, and various other considerations that are not taken into account by this proposal. So I think on those grounds, I would just reiterate that I would encourage members to refuse this application on those grounds under policies 1A and 1B placemaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Williams, can we go to the vote, please?
Yes, Convener. I was just whether there was anything Mr. Fogg would wish to add prior to the roll call.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, Mr. Fogg, do you have any questions or anything that you used to ask?
I have no questions, Convener, but if you want, I can just, for the avoidance of any doubt, narrate my understanding of the terms of Councillor Purvis's motion and of the amendment. In particular, Councillor Purvis has moved that the application be refused, being, in his opinion, contrary to Local Development Plan Policies 1A, which is that developments ought to contribute positively to the quality of the surrounding built and natural environment, and that the design and siting should respect the character and amenity of the place, and separately that it's contrary to placemaking policy 1B. And I presume that's because specifically in terms of criterion C, that the design and density should complement the surroundings in terms of appearance, height, scale, massing, materials and finish and colours. And his motion is seconded by Councillor Robertson. The amendment is by Councillor Gray, who moves approval in accordance with the recommendation in the Head of Planning Development's report, and that amendment is seconded by yourself. So I'll now pass over to Daniel Williams to take the roll call, the roll call vote.
Thank you, Mr. Williams.
Yes, thank you very much, Convener, and thank you very much, Mr. Fogg. So members, when I call your name, if you can let me know whether you'll be voting for the motion as proposed by Councillor Purvis or the amendment as proposed by Councillor Gray. Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Brown.
Make sure you unmute. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Can you hear me now?
That's you.
Yeah,
Yep.
amendment.
You're muted.
Amendment.
Yep.
Sorry, amendment.
Thank you.
Councillor Drysdale.
Amendment.
Councillor Gray.
Amendment.
Councillor Illingworth.
Amendment.
Councillor James.
Amendment.
Councillor McCall.
Amendment.
Councillor Purvis.
Motion.
Councillor Reid.
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson.
Motion.
Councillor Waters.
Amendment.
Councillor Lund.
Amendment.
And Councillor Wilson.
Motion.
Okay, members. I think that's 4 votes in favour of the motion and 9 in favour of the amendment. Mr. Fogg, can I just confirm that with yourself?
That's my count as well, Danny.
Thank you very much, John. So, therefore, the amendment will carry.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, committee. We will move on to the next paper in front of us, 521. This is a Section 42 application to modify Condition 15, contaminated land, of permission previously granted on 160099 AMM for Morris Leslie and Errol Airfield Grange in Errol. And I would like to ask Mr. Scott to speak to the report.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'll take committee through a series of slides. There are 3 stills I'll show you today. The first still confirms the location and boundaries of the site that has planning permission in principle. As noted in the site history section of the report, this was first approved in October 2010 and again in January 2014 through a Section 42 application. The entire mixed-use development, including the erection of the 240 houses itself, was approved in detail in July 2017. That's application reference 1600999. Works under part of that permission and also an associated permission for roads access have already commenced on site. As the report highlights, this current approval of matter specified in condition application seeks to vary the requirements of condition 15 that was applied to the detailed permission. To summarise, the changes sought to condition 15 would ensure that a detailed contaminated land assessment and subsequent decontamination would still be required, but only for the areas where development is currently approved. Any future development, if brought forward, must be subject to further assessment at that time. I'll take you now to the next still. This is an aerial shot, again showing the planning permission and principal site boundary identified. So just to clarify its location and proximity for members for the immediate surroundings of the site. The road that serves between Errol and Grange is located to the north, which would provide access to the development. Existing commercial uses are also located to the north of the site. Errol Airfield is located to the east, and to the south is agricultural land with the River Tay beyond, and to the west there's further agricultural land which separates this site with Errol Village, which is approximately 750 metres away from the western boundary. Moving now to the last still. This is the approved phasing plan that was approved under that detailed permission that was granted. Firstly, just to clarify that this plan is actually orientated east-west rather than north-south like the earlier stills. The approved development is located within the colour shaded areas marked as phases 1 to 5, which are the phases referred to in the proposed amended condition 15. All areas shaded in grey on this plan are indicative only, being noted as possible future development. They don't benefit from planning permission presently for detailed development. It's within these areas that if further proposals come forward, intrusive investigation and necessary remediation must be submitted at that time. As advised earlier, no physical changes are proposed to the development as part of this application. Instead, the changes are technical in nature only, relating to when contaminated land will be assessed and remediated. The amended condition 15 would allow development to proceed in phases 1 to 5 in a safe manner, but also ensure that any future development is subject to the required assessment and remediation at that time. Through this application, the opportunity has also been taken to clarify the requirements for SUD provision through condition 7 and to set a minimum floor level in the interest of reducing flood risk through condition 8. Convener, that concludes the stills for this item.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Scott. I'll open it up to questions. Councillor Wilson, you wish to ask a question from officers. Could you please ask your question?
Thank you, convener. I'm going to ask a double-barreled question. I know you want to take them one at a time, but they're basically the same question in a slightly different format, convener.
Okay.
This is only about the change in the condition. There's nothing about the overall application, is my understanding. Lead is a serious issue. Are we content that the remediation proposals of basically scraping the stuff off or moving it and reburying it on site are quite safe and quite sufficient? It says in the report they are, but I just want to press that question, please. And are we content that the revised condition that's proposed here is robust enough to make sure that it happens?
Thank you very much for the questions. I'm going to ask Mr. Robin Mackenzie to answer these, as he is our expert in this. So, Mr. Mackenzie, could you answer the questions, please?
Yes, good morning, convener, councillors, fellow colleagues. Yes, there's been extensive work conducted on this site to actually identify the extent of the lead contamination, and I am satisfied that the remediation proposals, which are to retain the material on site and to place it in funds for reasons for acoustic reasons, will be encapsulated and made entirely safe, and that will be verified by the company who will be undertaking the works. So yes, convener, I'm satisfied with the proposals.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Scott, do you wish to add to that?
Yeah, just to pick up on the second part of Councillor Wilson's question there in terms of the robustness, the condition 15 that we're proposing is essentially a standard condition which we would apply for the vast majority of contamination and decontamination proposals. It's only been modified insofar as when that proposal has to come forward for the phasing of development. We're entirely satisfied that it's robust and it meets the required tests in it for a planning condition. So if we are required to get the information and to take any action at a later date, that allows us to do that.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, do we have any further questions for officers? No, there are none, so I will ask for a motion. I'm going to move the paper myself. I do like to give everyone a chance, but I'm going to come in with this one. I would like to move the paper in accordance with the report of handling. We are looking at changing a condition to help move this forward, and I'm happy to do so. And I believe Councillor Illingworth. Oh, we have a raft, but Councillor Illingworth was in first. You wish to second the motion?
Yep, I'm happy with the proposal, and I'm very glad to see that all the risks are being managed correctly.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any comments or any amendments? Sorry, amendments first. Are there any amendments regarding this paper? As nothing has come forward, I will open up for any comments that anyone would like to make. No, there are no comments. Then in that case, the paper is approved. Thank you very much indeed. That then moves us on to the local applications. The next application is alteration and formation of vehicular access and parking area on 171 Glasgow Road in Perth. And I would like to ask Mr. Smith to speak to the report. Thank you.
Thank you, convener. I can now take you all through a set of plans and photographs to set the scene and identify a number of elements associated to the proposed driveway. So the first slide shows the location of the property on the north side of Glasgow Road, north of the junction with Hewlands Terrace. That same road also runs along the rear of the property. The second slide, this shows a plan that zooms in a little and then also sets out in detail the layout of the physical works proposed and the sight lines in blue, also indicating the position of a bus stop within the southern arm of the sight lines. An opening of 3.3 metre width would be created in the existing wall, and reprofiling and landscaping of the existing garden undertaken. The red triangles in the image to the right are an area where visibility displays into the site are to be maintained. The primary parking area is to be 5.035 metres across. The overall depth from side to side is 9.24 metres, and a turning head 2.075 metres by 3.15 metres are all to be provided. However, the two vehicles indicated on the plans are shown for information only. The third slide. Here we now see the first in a series of photographs, this looking from the existing pedestrian gate into the site, and this is the position where the driveway is to be formed. Next, we then see a wider view of the property as it faces onto Glasgow Road, taken from the opposite side of the road. Next, we then see a closer image from the footway immediately adjacent to the wall along the frontage, and that shows the extent of the existing wall and also the gate and fencing which is in place. Moving to slide 6, we now see or will see a series of images and annotated plan which sets out views from various points of interest. This first image and plan looks north from the south side of the junction of Newlands Terrace and Glasgow Road, as referenced by number 1 on the plan and the dotted line that takes you to that. Here you can see the bus shelter on the left side of Glasgow Road. You should note that, and it will be referred to again in subsequent slides and is also referenced in the report which is before you. The next slide, in the second of these series, identified by number 2, and again the dotted line on the plan, sees a photograph taken from close to the proposed driveway looking south along Glasgow Road. Again, the bus shelter and an adjacent waste bin is visible. The next slide. Now we look north up Glasgow Road from adjacent to the wall gate, again where the driveway is to be formed. And it should be noted that the overhanging vegetation could be removed by the Councillor's Roads Authority without third-party approval. The next slide, and this is the fourth image. It looks south from further up Glasgow Road, the street sign and burgundy tree both being close to where the proposed driveway is to be positioned. Then, moving to the next slide, we now look south along Newlands Terrace to the rear of the property from close to the junction with Fraser Terrace, again in the number 5 and the direction arrow shows you there. Next, with our arrow 6, we look north from the junction with Braeside Gardens, and next is the final number arrow that looks from close to the rear boundary of the property, which is on the right side of the road as we look at it, I think close to where the skip is positioned there. So that now concludes the presentation and we return to the plan of the proposals. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much, Mr. Smith. We now have deputations to listen to. I believe Mr. Alistair Campbell is online. Is that correct, Mr. Campbell? Are you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Mr. Campbell. Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to pass you over to my Vice Convener, Councillor Braun, who will take you through the timing of all of this, and then, if you're agreeable, you'll be maybe get some questions from some of the committee, if that's okay. So, Councillor Braun, if you could take Mr. Campbell through the process. Thank you.
Fine. Thank you, Convener. Good morning, Mr. Campbell. Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine, thank you.
Okay. As is normal, you'll have 5 minutes to do your deputation. At the 4-minute mark, I will give you a warning that there's 1 minute left to go, diplomatically interrupting you. If you're happy with all that, I will start the clock when I next hear your voice. Okay.
100 years of streetscape would be scarred with impact on inner city wildlife. We have been offered a turning head that's too small, an assurance 2 cars can exit in forward gear, subsequently dismissed by a sweep plan analysis that shows 2 cars cannot be supported. We have further assurance that only 1 car would now use the site. A sweep plan that has been deliberately reduced the size of the car to fit the layout of that is not fit for purpose. This could compromise public safety by fostering reversing onto the busy Glasgow road. We have a visibility display for lightly trafficked roads that states an obstruction to visibility should not fully obscure a vehicle or pedestrian, including a wheelchair user or child. We have shown a pedestrian and cyclist are fully obscured at the bus shelter and they cannot see the proposed exit. The shelter acts as a mirror and you can see the reflection of oncoming traffic. This is the same for pedestrians, cyclists and cars. Photos and video link evidence of this is in our letter. So visibility should not be fully obscured. It should obscure a car, a pedestrian, including a wheelchair user or child. Officials should be the guardians of these tests and tests and standards compromised is public safety compromised. Points 23 and 32 contradict each other. If precedent is irrelevant to future developments, why is it used to validate weaknesses in this application? Points 22 and 34 contradict each other. I do not recognise the description to reject a solution to the rear at Viewlands Terrace. My courteous neighbours never ever park over each other's curtilage. It is a courtesy that is respected and benefits everyone. There is a viable solution available to park 2 cars off street at the rear. It would only use 6.36% of the rear and side garden versus 87% of the front garden. I have given detailed comparisons in our letters supported by photographs. My garden is handed, but the topography is essentially the same. So the photographs are of my garden. With the slope being only 5.3 degrees, you could remove the garage and drive in off the street. I yield my time back and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Campbell. Hand you back now to convener.
Thank you very much indeed, and thank you for your deputation, Mr. Campbell. We have a question for you. We actually have 2 questions by the looks of things from Councillor Wilson. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, convener. Thanks, Mr. Campbell. I hope you can hear me. Okay.
I can hear you fine, thank you.
Thank you. There are really issues here about road safety that you've pointed out. Can you say a bit more about the usage of the bus shelter and bus stop by school children? You briefly mentioned pedestrians, but maybe you want to say a wee bit more about that?
During normal school term, there's an exceptionally high footfall of school children around this area, with 2 high schools, primary schools, nursery, special needs school. So the street is exceptionally busy during school term. And the children use the bus stop every single day. In fact, they use that bus stop to get on before the bus stop that's further down to go down into the city. And there can be groups of 10, 20 school children there. It's very heavily used.
Thanks, convener. Just my second question's relating to alternative areas for parking. We did see the slides that showed quite fully Viewlands Terrace. In your view, Mr. Campbell, are there still adequate facilities for on-street parking in Viewlands Terrace?
Yes, there is. There definitely is. In fact, because of this application, I've been not tracking, but I've been watching what's happening at the back. And for example, this morning at 8 o'clock in the morning, between Viewlands Terrace, where you come up to Fraser Terrace, there was 10 parking spaces available, would have been available overnight. And as I said in my earlier statement, the neighbours all respect each other's curtilage, and it works. It's like an unwritten rule, and it works for everybody. We do have occasional tradesmen come or visitors, but they're normally away by tea time.
Thank you. Thanks, convener.
Thank you. Councillor Braun, you have a question?
Thank you, convener. Yes. Going back to the question of road safety again, the report does mention there are other properties with access of this type onto the road, and I appreciate the bus shelter is not always going to be a factor, but cars reversing out onto the road across the public footpath. Have you ever known of any accidents, of course, because of people reversing out onto the road, either forward or backward, perhaps?
I'm not aware of any, but that doesn't mean to say none have happened. And I would also say that it was a requirement by the Transport Planning Officer that cars would exit in a forward gear. The subsequent street plan analysis have proved it can't be. And that street plan analysis, again, has been doctored to use a small
Mr. Campbell, the question was regarding any accidents. I'm sorry, but I'm being very strict today about continuing deputations. You've had some time to make a deputation. The question was on any accidents. I was wondering if you could curtail it to, in your knowledge, has there been any accidents?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Campbell. Thank you, Camina.
Thank you. Councillors, do we have any further questions for Mr. Campbell? No, Mr. Campbell, sorry to cut you off there, but I am being quite strict on making sure that we follow the regulations. So sorry to cut you off. Thank you very much indeed for your time today. Thank you for coming along and phoning in so that you can make your points, and it's very much appreciated. Thank you. Okay, we now have Mr. Stuart Ogilvie, who is the applicant, who would also like to make a deputation. So, Mr. Ogilvie, are you online?
I am, yes. Can you hear me?
We can hear you indeed, sir. Thank you very much. I will do exactly the same thing. I'll pass you over to my vice convener, Councillor Braun, who will take you through the process. And then, if it's okay with you, the committee will ask you some questions. So, Councillor Braun, please.
Good morning, Mr. Ogilvie. You can hear me? Good morning. As before, you'll have 5 minutes to make your deputation. I'll interrupt you at the 4-minute mark, so you have a 1 minute left to speak. And I will, if you're happy with that, I will start the clock when I next hear your voice.
Okay, thanks. My name is Stuart Ogilvie, and I'm the applicant for the formation of vehicular access and parking area at my property 171 Glasgow Road. Firstly, I'd like to thank Perth and Gunwest Council Planning Department for the recommendation of approval of this planning application and working with myself, my architect, to reach an agreeable solution. Due to the number of objections received for this planning application, I'd like to take the opportunity to respond with some factual and relevant information. Having spoken with direct and indirect neighbours regarding my proposal, there is a huge amount of support and understanding as to the reasons for the vehicular access to be formed on my property. Report 20123, prepared for this Planning and Development Management Committee meeting, outlines the responses to the objections in detail, but there are a few points I'd like to add to support to the content of the report. Section 21 covers traffic and pedestrian safety. School children tend to use Viewlands Terrace more than Glasgow Road as a route to the high school and the academy. Also, school children mostly walk down Murray Place and use the bus stop north of this junction. This therefore means the bus stop south of our property and Glasgow Road in this section is much less busy. The bus stop is located approximately halfway between my property and Viewlands Terrace, and as stated within the internal consultative response document, exiting my property is no less safe than exiting from Viewlands Terrace with the location of the bus stop. Perth and Gunwest Council Highways engineers and road safety department have no objection to this plan application. Section 22 mentions a sweat path analysis being undertaken to support the application and to demonstrate that a vehicle could always exit a forward gear. Just to clarify, only one car will be occupying the driveway at any one time, although the driveway will be large enough to accommodate 2 standard sized vehicles. There's no intention to use the property for business use, as was suggested by one objective. Section 28 talks about design and visual amenity, and that certain measures will be put in place to retain the architectural properties of the building. Furthermore, we intend to landscape the frontage of the property to a high standard in line with most neighbouring properties. The driveway will simply not be a massive gravel. The large cherry blossom tree will be retained as part of the development and not removed, as has been suggested by some objections. Additional planting will also be placed, which will add to the existing views and not detract from The parking at the rear of the property has been mentioned in many objections as a reason not to have a driveway or constructed at the front of my property. It seems to be a misconception by objectors that this is unrestricted parking, which is factually incorrect, as it is a public road and anybody can park there without penalty. Section 34 of the above mentioned report describes parking on Viewlands Terrace, which is a public road, as problematic. It should be noted that the residents of Viewlands Terrace mostly have their own driveways but choose to park on the road, which further compounds the issue. Furthermore, some residents have up to 3 cars and again choose not to use their driveways or garages due to the steep gradients of them and the wear this has on their vehicles, which is understandable. As we have 3 young children, I prefer to have a driveway at the front of my property. It is not uncommon for my partner to return with 3 children and bags of shopping, have to walk as far away as the end of Viewlands Terrace, which is a safety concern. As I work away from home, my partner is on her own and has no help. Section 34 also mentions a garage is available for parking at the rear of the property and rightly mentions this as being too small for modern cars. I would further add that the garage is in a poor condition, is not structurally sound, has an asbestos roof which leaks very badly, and is not considered fit for purpose, and as such will be removed as part of the driveway works. I acknowledge that the last 3 points in section 16 are not material considerations. However, I'd like to mention that the last bullet point on the impact of the structural integrity of my property and the adjoining property at 173 Glasgow Road. One objection goes as far as calculating the volume of cuts required from the property to form the driveway and how this may adversely affect the stability of the building's foundations. As a chartered civil engineer myself, I can confirm that I have assessed the stability of the foundations and there are no concerns with the removal of this volume of material, which is offset a significant distance from the foundations.
You have 1 minute left.
Sure. The formation of the small retaining structure does not undermine the foundations, as the formation level of the retaining structures are at a higher level than the building's foundations. This opinion is also shared with another chartered civil engineer with whom my architect consulted with for a second opinion. This also answers a point raised within the objections that no engineering input or certification has been used in this process, which is factually incorrect. Finally, I'd like to state that myself, my architect and Perth and Kinross Council Planning Department have worked together to agree a solution that will add the visual amenity to the plot and reduce the parking congestion on Viewlands Terrace. This development, in my opinion, is a positive addition and the property will ensure my family are kept safe and can rely upon parking within their own property. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ogilvie, and I'll return you back now to the convener.
Thank you, Mr. Ogilvie. Thank you for that. We have a question from Councillor Wilson. Your question, please.
Thanks, convener. Good morning, Mr. Ogilvie. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for your presentation and presenting your case. I can understand why you're looking at car parking. When you were considering the current application, did you look at the alternatives for using the Viewlands Terrace access and the garage, as you've said, is seen better days, I think is how you describe it, and using a part of the back garden as an alternative site for providing parking for 2 cars?
Yeah, we did consider that. Viewlands Terrace is a very narrow road. If you imagine, there's cars parked on both sides, so it's very difficult to exit from a garage or a driveway from that side of the property. So people who would need to park, quite far away from your drop curbs to be able for you to turn around and safely out of your property. So that's why we dismissed that option.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, can I ask before I let Mr. Ogilvie go, there are any further questions for Mr. Ogilvie? No, Mr. Ogilvie, you get off very lightly. As far as questions are concerned, there are no more. I thank you very much indeed for your time today, and we'll move on with the application. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, do we have any questions for officers? Okay, thank you very much. We have a question from Councillor Tom Gray. Apologies, Councillor Gray.
Thank you, convener. Could you let me know how many of the neighbouring properties have access onto Glasgow Road? That is within 3 houses of the one we're talking about.
Thank you, Councillor Gray, for your question. In terms of the property, a number of the properties across the other side of Glasgow Road have accesses onto Glasgow Road. I think that was evident in a number of the photographs shown. However, if you're asking how many properties have driveways, free property either side of this site, then there are none on that side of the road. But if you look at some of the photographs in the presentation, there are a number on the other side of the road and elsewhere on Glasgow Road. Thank you.
Looking at the, I'm actually looking at the Google Earth photograph as it happens at the moment, and it would appear that the one adjacent, immediately adjacent to the one we're concerned with, would seem to have an access onto the road. Is this not correct?
In terms of that west side of Glasgow Road, no, that's not the case.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson, your question, please.
Thank you, convener. Would it be competent to have a condition that only entrance and egress would be by a forward gear? I think that is probably the whole idea of the design, but would it be competent to have it that as a condition?
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah,
thank you, Councillor Anderson. Well, if you look at our condition, we have not included for that. We don't consider that that would pass the various tests required by conditions. It would not be something that could be enforced, and it may not be seen as reasonable in all other instances. Access onto a road of this type is not required by the Highway Code. It is recommended, but we feel that we couldn't condition that and then control that. Therefore, we have not recommended that that's the case. Mr. Fogg may have a comment.
Mr. Fogg, do you have a comment on that?
Only to really echo Christian Smith's advice, I think it would be hard to justify such a condition, having regard to the conditions circular as being reasonable in all respects and readily capable of enforcement. So I would have concerns about its legality.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it was just something I thought might help.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Drysdale, your question, please.
Thank you, convener. And the answer to this is possibly contained within the papers, but I can't readily find it. I wonder if officers could just clarify for me the distance between this proposed entrance and the bus stop, and secondly, the distance between the bus stop and the nearest junction.
My understanding, I don't think the distances are in the papers, but I will ask if we could get that information. Lachlan, are you available? Do you know the answer to that?
Yes, the vehicular access and the distance to the bus shelter is approximately 24 metres, and the distance and opposite from Viewlands Terrace and the bus stop is approximately the same. It's roughly about halfway between.
Okay, so 24 metres essentially, right? Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, do we have any further questions? No, we have no more questions on that. Then in that case, I will. I'm going to move the paper. I would. Sorry, Councillor Wilson, I got in front of you. I would like to move the paper as it stands. I think, and listening to both sides, whilst I understand the concerns that Mr. Campbell has, has just been stated that there is actually 24 metres between the junction and the bus stop, and 24 metres from the access out onto the road to the bus stop. I have parked in Viewlands a couple of times in Viewlands Terrace. It is not an easy place to find a parking spot, and it is not an easy place with people, as it is a public road. Many people park there who don't stay there, and quite rightly that is there for them. I understand the issues and the concerns that would be trying to take children along that road with cars parked on both sides. It must be particularly dangerous, making sure that you get children along the road to your property. I think what we're looking at is one car. I understand the concerns about reversing out onto the road, but those would be the concerns of anybody driving any car. And I take into consideration the issues put forward by Mr. Campbell, but I do believe that they have been properly assessed by our team and that they have been answered in the papers. So I would move the motion, and I can see that we have Councillor James is next to second. So Councillor James, could you please second the motion?
Convener, I've nothing to add to what you've already said. There's no, I can't see any reason why we wouldn't recommend allowing this. So I'm more than happy to second. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor James. We have an amendment from Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Convener. I want to move an amendment for refusal of the application, and I would quote the following policies just on the grounds of competency. First of all, there's quite a lot, so give me a minute just to narrate these. Policy 1A, placemaking. Do you want me to narrate the reasons for each one, or not, Convener?
I would prefer you to do so, just because it allows Mr. Fogg to be able to know exactly where you're coming from with your.
It'll eat into my time. Placemaking development must contribute positively to the quality of the surrounding built and natural environment. In my opinion, this does not do that. Policy 1A, again, design in detail and siting of the development should respect the character and amenity of the place. I don't think it does. I think it destroys part of the amenity of this section of the Glasgow Road. 1B, placemaking, subsection B, consider and respect site topography and the wider landscape character of the area. And then E, all buildings should create safe, accessible, inclusive places for people which can easily be navigated, particularly on foot, on cycle and by public transport, and these three things are particularly important at this location, Convener. Policy 17C, proposals which will improve the character of the environment of the area. Well, I don't think this one will. And policy 60B on page 102, all development proposals, including small-scale proposals, and this should be designed for the safety and convenience of all potential users. I don't think this proposal is either safe for the residents in 171 or people on the pavement or on the road, or cyclists and motorists, or people standing at the bus shelter. In detail of the report, in paragraph 2 speaks about some excavation. There's going to be an awful lot of excavation if 87% of the front garden disappeared. Paragraph 20 in the report, Convener, looks at providing solutions that are designed for safety and convenience of all potential users. That's not the case, in my opinion. Paragraph 22 in the report, in the last sentence, says there is, however, potential that larger vehicles would not have sufficient space to turn. Of course, they're not going to have space to turn. The information we saw, and the applicant was kind enough to admit that we're going to have vehicles reversing out onto the Glasgow Road, which is a busy main road, well trafficked, and that's a dangerous situation. Paragraph 25, sight lines. The reason, and this was Tom Gray's question, which was well put, about alternate. There are quite a lot of entrances to Glasgow Road on the other side of the road. That's inevitable. But on this side, as you'll see in the thing before us, that blue line is on a curve, and because that's a curve, the sight lines are diminished on both entrances, both sides of the road. So there's an issue about sight lines. There's a speeding problem on the Glasgow Road. We already, evidence of that is the roads safety team already have the site marked on for a speed control camera, right? So that's and we're also got a request in for a pedestrian crossing, signalised pedestrian crossing, to replace the school crossing patroller just down the road. The transport planning, I'm on para 26. Transport planning have considered the bus shelter. I've been on site. I'm very familiar with the site, and the reality is that the bus shelter does hide traffic and cyclists and pedestrians. On paragraph 29, this is accepted that these works will have a visual impact on the street scene. I think it will be detrimental. There's an indication in landscape that would integrate successfully in the surroundings. This whole area, this question was asked by Tom Gray, the area between Viewlands Terrace and Murray Place, Murray Crescent, there are no run-ins at all in this area. This is fully integral gardens out into the Glasgow Road. There are other areas that there are run-ins, but they're areas where the sight lines, the road straight, and the sight lines are much better. I've mentioned the point already about residential amenity. It does, I think, create a precedent. There are alternatives. There's adequate parking either in the site or in Viewlands Terrace. I know, convener, that that's not the application, but there are alternatives. And it says that there'll be planting done. Well, there'll be so much excavation in the front garden, they won't need an awful lot of planting to be done, because it literally will remove most of the garden. I think these are my main points, but in summarising, I think the proposal detracts from the amenity of the setting of this part of Glasgow Road, and in road safety terms, the entrance proposed is unsafe for pedestrians, cyclists, school children, who may be there in their numbers, and this is the main route from school. It's not Viewlands Terrace, actually, and also the residents who are likely to use the crossing, the entrance, and passing motorists.
Okay.
I think we've already had the issue about not putting a condition on with entering in a forward gear. That just makes the situation far worse. Thank you for listening, convener.
No, thank you very much. That was very detailed, Councillor Wilson. I wasn't sure it was going to be quite so detailed, but thank you for that. Councillor Anderson, you had first responded that you were going to second, but I couldn't work out whether that was a second or a comment. So can I just have clarity on that first, please?
Yes, I'm not seconding this. I'm wanting to make a comment.
Then that's fine. No, there was a second further up, but we will come back to comments shortly. Councillor Robertson, you wish to second this amendment?
Yes, thank you, convener. I won't go into such detail as Councillor Wilson went into, but I feel that to break into the wall in this section of Glasgow Road will actually set a precedent, apart from anything else, and it's a fine frontage as you come into Perth to see all the fine sandstone walls all the way down the hill. So I think it'd be very unfortunate to break into that wall and create openings which other householders could then follow as an example. The fact that there is possibility of getting access from the rear of the property makes this unnecessary. So I'm happy to second Councillor Wilson's motion.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Robertson. Do we have any comments? Councillor Anderson, you have a comment.
Thank you, convener. Yes, I'd like to make a comment. I support the motion completely. I mean, the whole reason that Mr. Ogilvie has applied for this is because of the traffic in Viewlands Terrace, and I can certainly back up that that is a very congested small street, very narrow, and it is practically impossible to find a space to park there. And there is sometimes strangers come in there and will park over people's access. So I've looked at this carefully, and as a professional driver, certainly Glasgow Road at that point may have a slight curve, but it doesn't affect your sight lines one bit. You can see clearly, and I mean, one has to remember that the bus stop is actually placed on the pavement, and you're entitled to drive carefully to beware of people on the pavement out to the edge of the pavement, and that gives you your sight lines before moving into the carriageway or a live carriageway. So I don't see why this should be an issue. Obviously, the ideal thing is not to reverse out, because that way you're unsighted by pedestrians. But it doesn't matter whether it's my humble little run-in here or any run-ins. I mean, the whole process of good driving is if you can't get turned in a run-in, that you reverse in. That is the procedure. So you reverse into a run-in, though it's not in the highway code, which is very unfortunate. You reverse in, so you're coming out into live traffic in a forward gear. So, I mean, it's all down to people's driving habits, to be quite honest. Therefore, I support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. Councillor Gray, you have a comment.
Yeah, thank you. It was a question of sightlines. If you have sightlines which are going to allow you to see the wall coming in there, people driving in see this lovely wall all the way in, you're going to have sightlines which are going to allow you to see accesses in and out from the Glasgow Road at the same time, I'd imagine.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any further? Yes, Councillor Drysdale, you have a comment.
Yeah, thank you, convener. Yeah, my only further comment would be that the stopping distance for vehicles travelling at the appropriate speed, the thinking distance is 9 metres and the braking distance is 14 metres. That's 23 metres, and so you know there's 24 metres. So I don't have an issue with this proposal at all, and I'll be supporting the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Do we have any further comments? No, then in that case, I will sum up. Yes, I've listened intently. Thank you very much, Councillor Wilson, for your amendment. I don't want to labour on too many of the points, but I also purposely took a trip to the site yesterday, again to get a visual of it, not when I was driving to High Street, but to actually stop the car and spend some time. And I do know Viewlands Terrace, and I have parked there a few times, and never, and all the times I have gone to Viewlands Terrace, have I never found it easy to find a parking space. I also understand the situation regarding the precedent, but the fact of the matter is, and we are well aware of this as councillors, that every application is viewed on its own merits, and as such, any other applications coming forward will be assessed entirely the same as this one has, and various sightlines and topography will all be taken into consideration, and the fact that we have decided, or if we're reminded to decide to put a driveway at the front of this house, will not actually bear any reference if the other buildings and other applications are not suitable. So as much as I understand the issue of precedence, I don't think that is something that we should really be looking at, because every application within Perth and Kinross is taken on its own merits. So I think, as I've already stated, that we should look at this. We should be mindful that people own their own houses and that they have their own needs and wants from that. There are 3 small children that live in this house, and Viewlands Terrace is difficult to park. And I think that we should be taking into consideration that it is their house, and that we can help in this way because it meets with every legislation and with every point that has come forward and that has been assessed and addressed in the report. So that is my summing up. Okay, I would like to then move on with the vote. Mr. Fogg, would you like to assess where we are with that, and then we'll move to the vote?
Yes, convener. The motion, as you know, is your own, which is to approve the application in accordance with the recommendations in the Head of Planning and Development's report of handling, and your motion has been seconded by Councillor James. The amendment is made by Councillor Wilson, who advocates the refusal of the application for 4 local development plan policy reasons. Specifically, that in his opinion, the proposal contravenes placemaking policy 1A, insofar as the developments should contribute positively to the quality of surrounding natural and built environment, and the developments proposed should respect the amenity of the area. Placemaking policy 1B, that the proposal should respect site topography and create a safe, accessible place. Residential policy 17C, the expectation the proposals improve the character of area, and transport standards and accessibility policy, specifically policy 60B, criterion A, which is that all development proposals shall be designed for the safety of all users. And that amendment is seconded by Councillor Robertson. I now ask Danny Williams to take the roll call vote.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. So again, members, if you can let me know whether you'll be voting for the motion as proposed by Councillor McCall or the amendment as proposed by Councillor, excuse me, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Anderson.
Motion.
Councillor Brown.
Motion.
Yeah, Councillor Drysdale.
Motion.
Councillor Gray.
Motion.
Councillor Illingworth.
Motion.
Councillor James.
Motion.
Councillor McCall.
Motion.
Councillor Purvis.
Amendment.
Councillor Reid.
Amendment.
Councillor Robertson.
Amendment.
Councillor Waters.
Amendment.
Councillor Williamson.
Motion.
And Councillor Wilson.
Amendment.
Okay, members, so that is 8 votes in favour of the motion and 5 in favour of the amendment. Jeff, are you able to confirm that that's what you have?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. So therefore the motion will carry.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. That is all the applications that are in front of us today. So that concludes today's Planning and Development Management Committee. Thank you very much for your attendance and your time. Thank you.